Okay, guys, we're going to do a search on Bloom's literature database, and we're going to look for reader response criticism. See what we get. Okay. So here we have what looks like some definitions. Um, as you may have seen in your LibGuide, I have already provided some files that explain the different schools of thought in literary criticism. So we're not going to really need to go there, but just to make sure you understand how you can look for this in Bloom's, I wanted to run this search. So Bloom's is a literary database. It's just for literature. So our other databases may cover literary information as well as magazines, reference tools, and all kinds of resources. They may include primary resources, primary documents, that is. So we could also use those, but because this assignment is all about literature, that's why we're using Bloom's at this on this first search. We're also going to look at EBSCO in this in just a few minutes after I've finished this search. Let's look at this first one. Okay, reader response. Okay, looks like we're going to view the reader. If we see right here, reader response theory views the reader as essential to the existence of a meaningful text. Okay, so some of this description has changed over time with you have different people writing about this criticism. It often changes over time. So we can get kind of a full description of this particular criticism theory and get an idea of what it means. So it looks like the reader is heavily involved, obviously, when we call it reader response criticism. So I'm going to take that to mean that we're talking about our reaction to when we look at a piece of literature. And in this one, I want to look at Edgar Allan Poe, one of his stories. So we're going to try one of those. Anyway, I'm not going to go through every one of these search results. We'll go back to that results list. By the way, you can always go back to your original search and see any of the other articles that have shown up. As you can see, there were right up here, it tells you that we've got 447 articles. That's quite a bit. Of course, we don't want to go through all of those. We're just trying to get a good understanding of where we need to start. Again, this is the beginning of your research. And I'll be talking about this when you come visit in the library. So this is really just to give you, a background of how we're going to go about it. Just consider this how you could start. It's an example of how you can start your research. Okay, so implied author and reader. These are interesting. Anyway, I'm not going to go through all of these. Okay, so that just gives me an idea that, all right, so there really is a critical theory here about the reader. And that kind of fits in with how I felt whenever I've read anything by Edgar Allan Poe. I don't know if you've had the same reactions to some of his stories, but I always wonder what is going on. Something either feels confusing or it feels terrifying. Um, we can feel sadness. We can feel, gee, I don't know what's going on. Who is this? Who is this narrator? Very often he uses first person narrator. And there are some reactions that come up with that after I've read one of Poe's stories. So let's look at it in that way. I'm going to go back. I'm going to change this to, let me go back to our guide really quick and see what I want you guys to do. Okay, in this I'm actually going to run another search, and I'm looking at this line right here in our guide. Um, and it's another one of his Gothic stories, kind of like Telltale Heart. Telltale Heart. That's always a tongue twister for me. Uh, Poe's Gothic story, Ligeia. Okay, and it's one of many that uses first person narrators, and I always have a reaction to that. I wonder if you guys do too. So one of my main reactions is, do I trust this narrator? So what we call this is unreliable narrator. So that's actually could be seen as a literary device. It often is. So it also kind of goes into the criticism called formalism, where you're just looking at the story, you're looking at the text, and using devices such as narrator, background, um, all kinds of literary devices that the author may use. So I'm going to try running unreliable narrator in Poe right here. Okay, so we'll go back to Bloom's and we'll type in unreliable narrator. And then I'll put in Poe. We'll just throw that in, those words together. Okay, so I'm going to take a quick look at the results list. We have only 21. And we see this how to write about. Okay, Edgar Allan Poe, how to write about the pit and the pendulum, how to write about the fall of the House of Usher, the Telltale Heart, Ligeia. Okay, that's one of the stories I wanted to focus on. So I could either just go there or I could go to this. I believe it's going to come from the same source. If you look at this right here, this database always puts the source in the results page. So that way you can make a decision on whether you want to click on that one or if you want to go to something else. So that one sounds good to me right now, because how to write about, that's kind of what we're learning how to do, right? Is how to write about an author or a title. So let's go to that. Now this one's Encyclopedia of American Short Story. So we can do that. Here's another one on Ligeia. Okay. Again, scrolling through. Now these are going into different works by possibly different authors. Yes, they are. Okay, so we're going to stick with, we could go to Ligeia first. Okay. So, Ligeia remains one of Edgar Allan Poe's best-known stories. It achieves Poe's goal of the single effect through the narrator's focus on Ligeia. And sorry about that, it was a phone call. It achieves Poe's goal of single effect through the narrator's focus on Ligeia, his deceased wife. Okay, and Here it says Poe also makes use of unreliable narrator whom the reader must constantly distrust. So that helps in my reaction, my reader's reaction. Okay. Okay, so that fits in. So this article may be very helpful. So if you wanted to use this, if I want to use this, that is, I might go to save, or I can go to download. Okay, I could download this and it'll go as a PDF on my computer. In fact, it's already done it. Okay, and then you can say, okay, I'm going to read that later. We'll go back to the search results right here. Okay, now I want to go back up to that very first one, how to write about Edgar Allan Poe. These are actually books that exist in print. This writing about whatever author. I'm sure there's one on Hawthorne. There's all kinds of authors that are used on this database. So to read Poe is to enter a realm of uncertainty. How about that? So what I'm doing here, you might have noticed already, I'm quickly scanning the article that comes up, the one that I've chosen, just to see is it going anywhere with my search terms. Here we go. We have the narrator who complains. Okay. Um, you know, the narrator becomes the character. Um, and they're often a strong character when you're talking about Poe. So here are some different perspectives. These are scholarly critics who have looked at his works. These will be helpful to you. Look, here's one, The Black Cat. That's one of his stories that you've probably read. Okay, we can look back at a biography of Poe, the man, Poe the man. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff here to help you. It just depends on which lens you're using to look for criticism, to look for meaning in the work that you want to focus on. Okay? So that's just one example. I'm going to stop it here. We'll get back to you later.